I still remember the first time I encountered that inexplicable chill at the edge of our local park. It was a humid summer evening when I, then just a child, found myself inexplicably drawn to an old, creaking swing set tucked away behind a tangle of overgrown shrubs. The park had always been a place of laughter and faded memories. Yet that particular swing set exuded an aura that was impossible to ignore. Its seat was strangely cold, even on nights when the air burned with the heat of summer. I could see my breath forming in the air as I hesitantly approached it, a ghostly mist that shouldn't have existed on such a sultry evening. I asked my older brother about it later, and he merely shrugged. It's just one of those things, man. Old metal sometimes holds on to weird temperatures, he said dismissively. But deep down I knew better. There was something unnaturally cold about that seat, as if it were infused with a malevolent presence, a chill that seeped into my bones the moment I dared sit upon it. I distinctly remember the shock of that icy contact, the way it clutched at my skin and sent shivers down my spine, leaving me both fascinated and horrified. In the days that followed, the memory of that swing never left me. I tried to convince myself it was nothing more than a quirk of rusted metal and a trick of the cooling evening air, yet the image of the seat, glistening with a frost that defied the season, haunted my every thought. I began to note odd details. The swing's slow, imperceptible creaks, the way the chains seemed to rattle in an unseen rhythm, and most disturbingly, the persistent cold that emanated from the seat. No matter how high the temperature soared, that spot remained frost-laden, as if it were a gateway to a winter that refused to thaw. As the years passed, I left my small town for college and eventually for work in the city. Life became a blur of routine and progress, and the strange memory of the swing set faded into the recesses of my mind until one sweltering summer when I returned home for a visit. Late one evening, the oppressive heat left me restless and yearning for the cool embrace of night. Unable to sleep, I wandered back to the park, the one place that held my childhood secrets. The park looked unchanged. The same rusted playground equipment, the same weathered benches, and there, in a forgotten corner, stood the swing set as if frozen in time. Under a fading orange sky, I hesitantly approached the swing. The metal seat, unmistakably icy to the touch despite the lingering heat, beckoned me like a siren's song. I sat down slowly, and immediately the cold penetrated deep into my skin, as if reaching into the very core of my being. In that moment, I felt an indescribable connection, a pull almost magnetic that drew memories back from a time when I first encountered this enigma. I closed my eyes and listened. In the stillness of that late hour, I swore I heard a sound, a faint whisper mingled with the creak of the swing's chains, a sound like soft weeping carried on the wind. My heart pounded erratically as I opened my eyes to see nothing unusual, only the empty park and the overgrown grass, bathed in the dim light of distant street lamps. Yet the sensation lingered, a heavy, inexplicable presence that made the air around me feel dense and oppressive. I stood abruptly, nearly falling off the swing, and bolted back home with a mind full of questions and a terror I couldn't shake off. In the following weeks, I became obsessed with the mystery of that ice-cold seat. I scoured old newspapers at the local library, combing through faded clippings and historical records in search of any mention of the swing set or odd phenomena at the park. I discovered mere fragments of lore, whispers of a local tragedy, a child who had vanished mysteriously decades ago, and hushed tales of an unnatural chill that haunted the park after sundown. Every account was shrouded in vagueness, yet they all shared one element: the inexplicable cold that emanated from that very swing. I began keeping a journal, detailing every unusual sensation, every unexplained drop in temperature that I experienced in my home, and the recurring images of that swing set in my dreams. My rational mind insisted that there was a scientific explanation, perhaps some quirk of thermodynamics, a remnant of an old refrigerant line buried beneath the playground, or even the result of poor insulation. But the more I wrote, the more I became convinced that something was very, very wrong. It was as if the swing set and that persistent cold were a physical manifestation of the past, a silent witness to sorrow, tragedy, and secrets too heavy to be forgotten. That summer, as the days grew long and the nights sweltering, I found that I could not escape the feeling that something was following me. There were moments when I would be alone in a crowded room and still feel a chill brush past me, or when the sound of the wind seemed to carry a faint, mournful cry that I couldn't place. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I'd awaken to find my room inexplicably cold, as if an icy presence had slipped in while I slept. The memory of that swing set and its unyielding frost had embedded itself deep within me, a ghost of a memory that would not be dismissed. And so, with a mixture of dread and determination, I resolved to confront this mystery head-on. I planned another visit to the park, a midnight journey back to the origin of that spectral chill. Armed with a flashlight, my journal, and a shaky resolve, I ventured back into the darkness of my hometown. Under a starlit sky, with only the quiet hum of night for company, I made my way to the park. The swing set loomed in the gloom like a relic from another era, its silhouette stark against the faint light of a waning moon. I approached it slowly, feeling the weight of every unanswered question pressing down upon me. Sitting on the ice-cold seat once more, I closed my eyes and listened. In the profound silence of that midnight hour, I thought I heard a soft murmur, a delicate, almost imperceptible sigh that seemed to rise from the swing itself. I could not be sure if it was the wind or something more sinister. Every instinct screamed for me to leave, yet a deeper, inexplicable compulsion urged me to remain. In that fragile moment of stillness, I realized that the ice-cold seat was not merely an anomaly of temperature. It was a doorway, a thin, trembling threshold between the world of the living and the echo of something lost, something forgotten, yet desperate to be remembered. As the night deepened and I eventually left the park, I carried with me a newfound awareness that some memories, once awakened, never truly fade away. The ice-cold seat on the swing set had etched itself into my soul, a spectral imprint that would haunt me for years to come. And even now, as I write these words with trembling hands, I wonder if that fateful encounter was not a solitary incident, but rather the beginning of an endless, creeping dread that lurks just beneath the surface of everyday life. Months turned into years, and life's relentless pace forced me to bury the chilling memories of my childhood. I moved away from my hometown, pursued a career, and built relationships that slowly, imperceptibly pushed that unsettling episode into the back of my mind. Yet, The passage of time did nothing to erase the vivid images of that icy swing set. The more I tried to forget, the more it haunted me. There were moments during the sweltering heat of midsummer or in the depths of a stifling night when I would suddenly feel a cold that wasn't mine, an inexplicable chill that crept into my bones like a whispered reminder of a forgotten past. I returned to my hometown one summer for a friend's wedding, and the familiar landscape stirred something deep within me. The park, with its neglected swing set, was exactly as I remembered, except for one terrifying detail. The ice-cold seat remained, untouched by the relentless heat of the day. With a mixture of dread and compulsion, I found myself drawn back to the park. I needed answers, if only to prove that my mind hadn't betrayed me with phantom chills and ghostly whispers. That evening, the sky was overcast, the heavy clouds promising an imminent downpour. I arrived at the park just as dusk began to settle, its shadows stretching long and sinister across the cracked pavement. The once joyful playground had succumbed to neglect, rusting metal, faded paint, and a silence that pressed in on all sides. The swing set, however, stood as an anomaly in that decay. Its seat shone with an otherworldly frost, a silent beacon in the gathering gloom. I walked slowly toward it, each step echoing in the stillness of the park. The gravel underfoot crunched with a sound that felt disproportionately loud in the quiet. When I reached the swing set, I paused for a moment, staring up at the chains in the seat that defied the heat. Without fully understanding why, I sat down. The instant my skin met the metal, an intense, biting cold surged through me. It wasn't merely a physical sensation. It was as if the cold carried with it an entire history of sorrow, a memory of loss that seeped into my soul. For what felt like hours, I sat there motionless. I closed my eyes, listening intently to the ambient sounds of the park, the rustling of leaves, the distant hum of traffic, and beneath it all, a subtle, rhythmic tapping. At first, I assumed it was nothing more than the creaking of the old chains or the settling of the structure in the cooling air. But then the sound grew deliberate, measured, like a slow, metronomic pulse that resonated with my heartbeat. I opened my eyes and scanned the dim surroundings. The park was empty, the swing set solitary against the fading light. And yet, there was an undeniable presence, a sense that I was not alone. In the periphery of my vision, I glimpsed a fleeting shadow that darted behind a cluster of trees. My pulse raced as I strained to catch another glimpse, but the figure was gone as quickly as it had appeared. Desperation and curiosity warred within me. I pulled out my phone and began recording, my hands trembling. "Is someone there?" I whispered into the darkness, my voice nearly swallowed by the night. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, as if answering my plea, the recording captured a faint, broken murmur. "Remember me." The phrase, indistinct and layered, sent a chill far deeper than the physical cold I felt. It was as if the very air was saturated with a sorrowful longing, a plea from beyond, carried on a whisper of wind. Unable to shake the feeling that I had stirred something ancient and sorrowful, I spent the remainder of the night there at the swing set. I questioned every sound, every shadow, and every inexplicable drop in temperature. The more I observed, the more I became convinced that the chill was not a mere quirk of nature. It was a manifestation, a physical echo of a tragedy long past. Over the following days, I scoured local archives, interviewed elderly residents, and pieced together the fragmented history of the park. I learned of a small girl named Elise, who had vanished mysteriously decades ago, last seen near this very swing set. Her disappearance had cast a long shadow over the community, and whispered legends spoke of a restless spirit doomed to wander the park in search of something it had lost. Every discovery deepened my dread. I began documenting every unexplained occurrence. Sudden drops in temperature in my apartment, fleeting images in peripheral vision, and recurring dreams of a sorrowful child playing alone in an endless, frost-bound park. The line between memory and reality began to blur, and I found myself increasingly obsessed with the mystery of that ice-cold seat. It was no longer just a strange anomaly. It was a symbol, a beacon of a grief and tragedy that had seeped into the very fabric of my existence. One evening, determined to confront the truth, I returned to the park once more. The sky was a canvas of stormy gray, and the wind carried with it a biting chill that belied the summer heat. As I approached the swing set, every step felt like a march toward an inevitable confrontation with the past. I sat on the frozen seat and closed my eyes, summoning the courage to listen to whatever whispered on the wind. And in that silence, I heard it again, the mournful refrain of a long-forgotten soul. Remember me. It was a plea, a sorrowful cry that resonated with every fiber of my being, demanding acknowledgement, demanding remembrance. I left that night with more questions than answers. The memory of that cold, persistent whisper would haunt me for months to come, a constant reminder that some tragedies never fade, that some wounds are etched permanently into the landscape of our souls. And as I resumed my everyday life, I found that the chill I experienced in the park had followed me, an unseen companion in moments of solitude and quiet reflection, a reminder that the past, no matter how deeply buried, never truly dies. Time, they say, dulls all edges, but for me, it only sharpened the chill. The more I tried to integrate the unsettling encounters with the swing set into my normal life, the more the darkness pursued me. Night after night, I began to experience inexplicable disturbances in the sanctity of my own home, a sudden, overwhelming drop in temperature, faint whispering that seemed to emanate from the walls, and dreams so vivid they left me drenched in cold sweat. The boundary between that haunted park and my daily existence had grown perilously thin, as though the sorrow of the past had seeped into my very soul. I started to record these occurrences meticulously. Every night, I set up a small camera in my bedroom, a digital chronicle of the inexplicable phenomena. At first, the footage revealed only shadows and random movements of curtains in the breeze. But soon, subtle anomalies emerged. In the deep hours of the night, around 3:15 a.m., I captured fleeting images of a small figure, a child perhaps, standing in the corner of my room. Its face was pale, eyes empty, and its expression one of profound sorrow. The figure vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving only the sound of soft, rhythmic tapping that echoed like a heartbeat in the silence. My sleep became a battleground of terror and despair. Each night, I dreamed of that park, the endless, frost-bound expanse, the creaking swing set, and the ghostly whisper of a child's voice, crying out, "Remember me." In my dreams, I would wander the park, chasing after that sorrowful figure, only to find a landscape shifting into an endless maze of darkness and ice. These dreams were so visceral that I woke up gasping, my body drenched in sweat, my heart pounding as if it might shatter. In the days following these nights of torment, I began to notice changes in myself. The cold, once confined to that isolated memory, seemed to infiltrate every aspect of my being. My hands would tremble uncontrollably, and my breath would catch in my throat at the mere mention of that cursed swing set. I started to question my own sanity. Was it possible that I had become so consumed by the mystery of Elise and the ice-cold seat that my mind had conjured these phantasms? Or was it that the park and that unyielding chill had somehow followed me, manifesting in my home as a reminder of a sorrowful past that refused to be forgotten? Late one night, unable to bear the relentless whispers and the ever-present cold, I decided to confront the darkness directly. I sat in my living room, the only light coming from a flickering lamp in the corner, and began speaking aloud to the emptiness. "Who are you?" I asked, voice shaking. "What do you want from me?" For a long, excruciating minute, nothing answered except the sound of my own breathing. Then, in a moment that defied explanation, the temperature plummeted. I saw my breath cloud the air in front of me, and the lamp's light dimmed as if struggling against an unseen force. A soft, almost imperceptible whisper slithered through the room, repeating a single word over and over: "Elise." It was not a plea, nor was it an accusation. It was as if the very air trembled with a longing that was as ancient as sorrow itself. I felt compelled to respond, to acknowledge the voice that reached into the deepest corners of my mind, but no words came out. Instead, I sat frozen, the chill wrapping around me like a shroud. The camera in the corner continued to record, its red recording light blinking in the oppressive darkness. When I later reviewed the footage, I could see faint movements that defied explanation: a shadow passing over the wall, a glimpse of a small figure near the doorway, and always in the background, the sound of soft tapping that I could not remove from the audio track. It was as if the presence had become part of my home, as inevitable as the ticking of clock. I took to researching every scrap of lore I could find about haunted objects and restless spirits. Late into the nights, I pored over online forums and dusty library books that spoke of cursed relics and ghosts bound by tragedy. Every account, every whispered rumor, echoed one thing: a soul left behind by a cruel twist of fate, desperate for remembrance. The more I read, the more I recognized the undeniable parallels with Elise, a name that had haunted my dreams and whispered on the wind since that first encounter at the swing set. My investigations led me to an old parish archive, where I uncovered faded records of a young girl who had disappeared without a trace from the park decades ago. Her story was as tragic as it was mysterious: a quiet, gentle soul who had once been the light of her family, only to vanish on a bitter autumn day. The more I delved into her history, the more I began to see that the icy chill I had experienced might not be a mere anomaly of nature, but a manifestation of her sorrow, a spectral imprint of a life cut short, and a soul left to wander in search of solace. In the following weeks, the boundary between my waking life and the supernatural grew increasingly indistinct. I began to experience moments where I felt a cold presence at my shoulder, a gentle yet insistent hand brushing against mine in the dark corridors of my apartment. I found myself compelled to leave messages on fogged-up mirrors, scrawled words like "remember" or "forgive me" that I swore I had not written. The relentless tapping, once confined to the park, now echoed through my home every night, each tap a slow, deliberate reminder that I was not alone. I started to fear that the presence might be following me, that I had somehow become the unwilling vessel for a tragedy that was not my own. And yet, despite the terror that gnawed at me, I could not bring myself to abandon the quest for answers. I had to know if I was merely losing my mind, or if Elise's sorrow had indeed crossed over into my world, tethering itself to me with icy fingers of despair. One particularly harrowing night, as I sat huddled in the darkness of my living room, I heard a clear, distinct sound, a child's laughter, soft and forlorn, echoing in the silence. It was a sound so achingly sad that it brought tears to my eyes, and for a moment, I believed I could see a small figure standing by the window, illuminated briefly by the streetlight outside. But when I rushed to the window, there was nothing there, only the empty night and the gentle patter of rain on the glass. I realized then that the haunting was no longer confined to distant memories or a forgotten park. It had become personal, a relentless, inescapable presence that was slowly consuming me from within. And as the nights grew longer and the whispers louder, I could no longer tell if the ghostly child was truly there, or if the sorrowful echo was a product of my own fractured mind. The days that followed became a blur of anxiety and dread, each moment punctuated by the unyielding cold and the incessant whispers of a past that refused to fade away. I began to withdraw from friends and colleagues, fearful that they might notice the haunted look in my eyes, the way my hands trembled when I least expected it. Every time I passed a reflective surface, a window, a mirror, even a polished countertop, I half expected to see the ghostly outline of a small girl staring back at me, her eyes brimming with sorrow and longing. I sought help from local paranormal investigators, desperate for an explanation that would anchor me in the realm of the rational. Their skepticism, however, only deepened my isolation. They listened to my story with thinly veiled pity, assuring me that such experiences were common manifestations of stress or sleep deprivation. Yet, as I presented the photographs and video recordings, the fleeting images of a spectral child, the unmistakable audio of soft tapping accompanied by whispered pleas, they could offer no rational explanation. Their equipment, once set up in my apartment, captured inexplicable temperature drops and faint, ghostly figures that defied conventional logic. But even the most seasoned investigator could not say for sure whether what we encountered was the product of an overactive imagination or something far more sinister. As the haunting intensified, I found my nights invaded by nightmares so vivid that I awoke with the lingering sensation of icy fingers brushing my skin. In one recurring dream, I was back at the park, sitting on that faded swing set, when a gust of wind carried a child's laughter across the barren landscape. I saw Elise, a pale, fragile figure clad in a tattered dress, reaching out to me with eyes that were both pleading and accusatory. The dream always ended the same way, by plunging me into an overwhelming darkness, the sound of relentless tapping echoing in my ears until I woke up in a cold sweat. My waking hours became a relentless battle against the creeping despair that threatened to overtake me. I found solace in the act of writing, pouring my terror and sorrow into journal entries that stretched on for pages. I recorded every chilling detail: the time when the tapping began, the exact temperature drops, the distorted voices that whispered my name, and the countless times I swore I saw a child's silhouette in the periphery of my vision. Over time, the journal itself became a relic, a testament to a life slowly unraveling at the edges, captured in ink and frozen in time. One particularly bitter night, when the air in my apartment was almost unbearable in its chill, I decided to confront the haunting directly. I gathered every piece of evidence I had, every scrap of recording and every photograph, and returned to the park for one final confrontation. With trembling determination, I drove under a moonless sky to the place where it all began. The park was as I remembered, desolate, shrouded in mist, and dominated by that solitary swing set whose ice-cold seat now seemed to pulse with a malevolent life force. I approached the swing set slowly, every step heavy with dread and the weight of unresolved sorrow. In my hand, I clutched the small locket that I had discovered among my grandmother's belongings, a token of remembrance and perhaps a key to unlocking the mystery. As I sat on the swing, the cold enveloped me once again, a sensation so intense that it felt like an intrusion upon my very soul. I opened the locket and whispered softly, "Elise, I remember you. I'm sorry you were forgotten." For several agonizing minutes, I sat in silence, the only sound the creaking of the chains and the persistent, rhythmic tapping that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the swing set. Then, as if in answer to my plea, the air around me grew even colder. I heard the unmistakable sound of soft, sorrowful laughter, a child's laugh tinged with melancholy. I blinked rapidly, my eyes straining to pierce the fog that cloaked the park. And then I saw her, a fleeting glimpse of a small figure, dressed in an old-fashioned frock, standing at the edge of the swing set. Her eyes, dark and sorrowful, met mine for a brief, heart-wrenching moment before she vanished into the mist. At that moment, I knew that Elise's spirit was real, that her sorrow had transcended time, binding her to that cursed park and, inexplicably, to me. I spent the rest of the night there, speaking into the darkness, asking questions that I feared would never be answered. The park, with its silent witnesses and unyielding chill, offered no comfort, only a profound sense of loss and a reminder of the fragility of our mortal existence. As dawn approached and the first weak light of day crept over the horizon, I left the park with a heavy heart and a soul that felt forever changed. The icy grip of that haunted memory, the spectral whispers of a forgotten child, had seeped into me irrevocably. Returning home, I found that the presence had followed me. The inexplicable chill, the soft tapping at odd hours, and the mournful whispers became an inescapable part of my daily life. I realized that I had become a vessel for a tragedy that spanned generations, a living testament to a sorrow that refused to be forgotten. And every time I closed my eyes, I could see the spectral figure of Elise, her eyes filled with longing and her smile tinged with an indescribable sadness. It had been weeks since my last visit to the park, yet the chill of that night continued to haunt me. My apartment, once a sanctuary from the relentless pace of the outside world, had transformed into a prison of icy memories and restless phantoms. The persistent drop in temperature became my constant companion. No matter how many layers I wore or how many heaters I turned on, a numbing cold permeated every corner of my home. And every night, as the clock neared the witching hour, I would hear that same slow, deliberate tapping echoing through the silence, as if a spectral force was marking the passage of time in a language only it understood. Desperation pushed me to seek one final solution, a way to break free from the icy grip that had claimed me. I began to research ancient rituals and forgotten rites. Anything that might offer a means to exorcise the lingering presence of Elise's sorrow from my life. Late one night, I stumbled upon a reference to a ritual of remembrance, a means to honor a lost soul so that it might finally find peace and release its hold on the living. The instructions were vague, yet they spoke of creating a sacred space, gathering symbols of remembrance, and speaking words that would bridge the gap between the living and the dead. With a heart full of trepidation and hope, I decided to try the ritual. I spent days preparing a small altar in my apartment, a modest table adorned with a single white candle, the locket that had become both a talisman and a reminder of my haunted past, and a faded photograph of a little girl I found in an old archive who bore an uncanny resemblance to the spectral figure I had seen. I arranged these objects carefully, each placement deliberate, as if I were piecing together a puzzle that spanned both time and memory. That night, as I sat before the makeshift altar, the room seemed to hold its breath. I lit the candle, its flame dancing weakly against the oppressive darkness that pressed in from the cold walls. My hands trembled as I opened the locket, and, with a voice that wavered between sorrow and determination, I began to speak aloud. Elise, I remember you. I honor you. May your soul find peace, and may the chill that binds us be lifted. The words, simple and heartfelt, echoed in the silence of my apartment, mingling with the soft, unyielding sound of tapping in the distance. For a long time, nothing happened. I sat in tense silence, watching the flame flicker as if it too were uncertain. Then, gradually, the cold began to recede. The oppressive chill that had seeped into every corner of my home seemed to lighten, as though a long-held breath had finally been exhaled. I clutched the locket tightly, feeling the weight of my own hope and the sorrow of a lost soul intermingled. But as the minutes stretched into hours, an unsettling sensation crept over me. The tapping returned, softer at first, then growing steadily louder, as if marking the passage of a long, sorrowful heartbeat. My eyes widened as I realized that the sound was coming not from outside, but from within. I felt it deep in my chest, a cold throb that pulsed in tandem with the rhythm of the tapping. It was as if the very air around me had become alive with the echo of a forgotten tragedy. I rose from my seat, the candle's light casting trembling shadows on the walls, and moved toward the window. Outside, the night was silent, the rain long since ceased, and the sky a heavy, impenetrable black. And yet, in the glass, I could see a faint reflection, a small, delicate handprint pressed against the pane, as if from a child. My breath caught in my throat. I wiped it away with a shaking finger, but deep down, I knew that the mark was real, an indelible imprint left by something beyond my understanding. In the days that followed, the ritual did little to dispel the lingering presence. The cold never fully left me, and the tapping persisted, a constant reminder of a sorrowful bond that could not be easily broken. I began to notice subtle changes in myself. My reflection in mirrors seemed to waver, as if another presence lurked just behind the glass, watching with eyes full of longing. At times, I would catch a glimpse of a small, ghostly figure in the corner of my vision, only to have it vanish when I turned to look directly. I realized then that the ritual, though meant to free both of us, had only deepened the connection. Elise's sorrow was not so easily exorcised. It had entwined itself with my very essence, a spectral tether that bound me to that faded swing set and the frozen memories of a long-forgotten tragedy. Every night, as I lay in bed, I felt that cold presence growing stronger, its spectral fingers reaching into the corners of my mind, urging me to remember, to never forget. In a final act of desperation, I decided that I could no longer live with this icy legacy. I began planning my departure from the town that had become a prison of sorrow and spectral whispers. I packed my belongings hastily, avoiding any reflections of the past that might cling to me like the chill. But as I drove away in the early hours of a gray morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not truly free, that the cold, the tapping, and the mournful whispers would follow me, no matter how far I ran. Even now, as I write these words, I can still feel the lingering chill in my bones, and every so often, when the night is silent and the air grows cold, I swear I hear a soft, rhythmic tapping, like a heartbeat echoing from a place where time stands still. I wonder if somewhere, in the forgotten corners of that haunted park, the ice-cold seed on the swing set continues to bear witness to the sorrow of a lost soul, forever waiting for someone to remember. I'll leave you with this final thought. Sometimes, the past is not something you can escape. It follows you, a silent specter in the darkness, a reminder that some wounds run too deep to ever fully heal. And in the coldest moments of the night, when the tapping grows louder and the shadows seem to whisper your name, remember that you, too, may have become a part of a legacy that refuses to be forgotten.